Welcome to Resiliency Within. I am your host, Elaine Miller-Karras. Today's show is about cultivating resilience and compassion. My guests today are Brendan Ozawa-de Silva and Timothy Harrison. They are both from the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics at Emory University. The center was established by His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Emory University to carry out the joint vision of a compassionate and ethical world for all. And its mission is to promote human flourishing by developing educational programs, facilitating dialogue, and engaging in research. They will illuminate us about two programs developed by the center. The first is called Cognitively Based Compassion Training. We're going to call it CBCT for brevity during the broadcast for adults. And the second is called Social, Emotional, and Ethical Learning. We're going to be calling it C-Learning. And this is for students from the ages of kindergarten through 12 and higher education. Both programs are the subject of scientific research and aim to be at the cutting edge of trauma and resilience-informed contemplative practice. Tim and Brendan will outline the programs which have incorporated resilience skills, including the Community Resiliency Model, and will discuss how contemplative practice and resilience skills can be integrated for the promotion of physical, mental, and social well-being. But let me tell you a little bit about our guests first. So Timothy Harris joined the Center for Contemplative Science and Compassion-Based Ethics in 2013 and is the Associate Director of CBCT. He coordinates the expanding CBCT Teacher Certification Program, as well as the provision for CBCT for research studies. He's been a long-term practitioner of both Lojong and Zen meditation before expanding his outreach to those of various backgrounds through CBCT. Brendan Ozawa-de Silva is the Associate Director of C-Learning at the Center. His research focuses on the psychological, social, and ethical dimensions of pro-social emotions and their cultivation with a focus on compassion and forgiveness. And his chief interest lies in bringing secular ethics, the cultivation of basic human values, into education and society. I happen to know about both of these gentlemen that they're both like music and they play instruments. They didn't put that in their bio, but I have to do a little shout out because I actually heard Brendan play, and he is quite good at what he does. He is, if you could see him right now, he is smiling. So I did bring that into your CVs. So I met both Tim and Brendan through my work at the Trauma Resource Institute and have been honored to serve as one of the senior consultants to the C-Learning program. So my two guests, as we start, is there anything that is on your mind that you would like to begin with? And I'm going to start with Brendan. Is there
Yeah, I
anything
was
that,
thinking
yes.
that incredible intro and summary of our work and programs was so brilliant. I don't think I've ever heard it done better before. And I was thinking we need to hire you not as our trauma and resiliency expert alone, but as a kind of marketing PR guru for
Oh,
us.
well, I'm there for you. Anything that
That was so
you ask
brilliant.
me to do, I'm there at Emory. You know that, Brendan.
Yeah, that was
Okay.
great. That was great. It made us sound very impressive, actually.
All right. Okay, Tim, how about for you? Is there anything that's on your mind that you'd like to begin with now that we've heard Brendan's marketing ideas?
Well, I have to admit, I think Brendan put some words to my feelings. It's like, which was, how are we going to live up to this incredible introduction?
Oh, I know that you
Um,
both can. But I want to
but
start out
yes.
with a question to both of you because we were, of course, had spoken before the show started and about how you two met because it really
Mhm.
does kind of journey into the work that you're doing. So, Tim, I think you wanted to go first to talk about how you and
Okay.
Brendan met.
Sure. Yeah. When it does really connect to the topic at hand. So it I really think it was probably in 2010, so over a decade ago now. I was living in Atlanta, an architect and parent of young children, and heard about the Dalai Lama coming to Emory University to have some conversations with scientists and researchers, and thought, I've done some meditation on my own, a lot focused on stress reduction for myself, and but I want to hear what this is all about. Why would the Dalai Lama be speaking at Emory University? So I went to that, and um, there they were talking. The panel that I could get tickets to was a panel about some new research on a meditation program that was actually focused on compassion for others, not just stress reduction and kind of self-insight, which is what I had thought meditation was all about. And then I thought that was interesting. So I'm going to take that course. So I signed up for it. But then a couple of years later, I was trying to figure out a place for my son to go to second grade. He had had one experience in kindergarten that wasn't so great, and then another first grade school that just wasn't right for him. And as a father, there's not much more important to me than knowing, that my son was being taken care of. So we were researching schools, and all of a sudden, in my own neighborhood, I heard about this school teaching this compassion program to young children. And I realized these people doing it were the same ones I had heard about 2 years earlier. And I said, I've got to know about this. And the school said, well, you could stop in and see the class if you want. So, well, yes, of course. So I went in, and there was this person, later known to me as Brendan, with some colleagues there. They had worked with an expert second grade teacher to bring this program that had been designed for young adults and adults, CBCT, to the kids. And they were experimenting with ways to help young children sort of grasp and learn and connect with these concepts that were central to our compassion training program for adults. It wasn't my program yet, but I've wound up, my whole career has changed, and I've joined the center since then. But that's how I met Brendan. And I remember grabbing him out in the hall after the class and saying, God, well, I got to hear more about this. This is amazing what you're doing. And of course, my son, we wound up signing him up for that school. It seemed like a good fit. But
well, and as I'm hearing you talk about, your love for your son and making sure he was well taken care of. And I think at this time in our nation, in the world, with children being at home because of the pandemic, and how do we cultivate those moments so that children can learn about compassion? And we see so much vitriol in the world. It really lightens my heart to hear you going on that search. And then, oh my goodness, that you found the treasure of Brendan. So Brendan, I'm calling you a treasure. Because he's been spearheading this wonderful program called C Learning. But tell us a little bit more. So do you remember meeting Tim, and then what happened? Because I think there was something about a prison project that was connected into all of this.
Yes, I do remember meeting Tim very vividly. Although it's great to hear this story, because I didn't know certain aspects of what he said. So we were visiting the school, the Paideia School here in Atlanta, and there are a few teachers there that welcomed us and worked with us on adapting CBCT, which, as you said at the beginning, Elaine, was a compassion training program, meditation program for adults. And they were helping us adapt it to kids. That I and the colleague that Tim alluded to, Brooke Dodson Lavelle, we spent a couple of years doing this, just seeing if we could bring this stuff to kids. But I remember the day Tim came into one of the classes, and these were 5 to 7-year-old kids, early elementary. And I thought he just happened to be wandering through the school looking at it for his kid. I didn't know that you had that background and that you knew this was happening and you saw the 2010 conference and everything. So we finished the class, and then we were wrapping up, and this guy just comes up to me and says, oh, this is great what you're doing. I'm thinking about sending my son here. And this is so important for the boys. The boys are never going to learn this stuff unless unless people like you bring it in. That was what I remember him saying specifically. And I thought, wow, this is a nice guy. He really cares about kids and his children. But I didn't know who he was.
But I'm just this a second. The boys need to learn about compassion. I think this is such an important statement that you're making. I think we all do, but I think that, yes, boys, can you both illuminate a little bit more about that thinking?
Go ahead, Tim. You're the one.
Well, I had forgotten I said that to you, Brendan. I totally forgot that, but I'm not surprised.
Rehearse this. This is really important, Tim.
I'm not surprised I said it, because I think that one of the I don't know, I'd call it a regret of my life is that how long it took me to realize that I had this capacity for compassion, for love, for tenderness. And I think it's because I was raised as a male in our society where that part of me was not spoken of as a valuable part or even something that was natural for young boys to experience. And so it was really only in having my own children and, holding them in my hand that all of a sudden uh, I was having these emotions and feelings that I really didn't even know I was capable of. And in a way, my 18-year-old, who ironically I just put a Band-Aid on right before our our meetings. I'm
We
still
never
tending
stop
to
caring for
him.
our
Yes,
children. Yes.
yes. But this journey, since having, of course, being a parent as best I can is hard enough. But then in my professional life, it's been so rewarding to explore the science of compassion, the practice of compassion, the universality of it as well, so that maybe we can, with our programs, shift the narrative so that boys don't have to discover their compassion when they're 18 or 40, like I did. That it's something that they can know they're capable of, even at the age of 5, which of course they are.
Well,
So
I have
that's
to say that as you were talking about the tenderness that is inside of you, I feel so honored because of having been in a training with you and
yes.
witnessed your wonderful compassion and tenderness. And to
Mm,
think that it took a while to get there when
yeah.
I saw it so visibly, and to think about what you do now is to cultivate that in adults in the present moment so that they don't have to wait so long. And then we have Brendan working very hard to cultivate it with children. So Brendan, back to you about this. I mean, thank you so much
Sure.
for sharing that.
Well, I think we move on to another story, the prison story, but I think the which also involves Tim and me, Tim and I. But I think also even in those early classes with the little kids, we saw signs of how there were signs of how a trauma and resilience approach would help what we were doing, because we would spend sometimes weeks, months just trying to get the kids to sit still and meditate and do mindfulness on the breath and stuff like that. And we were clearly seeing that it was a lot easier in some schools than other schools. The first school we worked in was Paideia, and it was actually pretty easy in Paideia. But Paideia is a private school. It's a very special school here in Atlanta. Not that I mean, every school is special, but it has quite unique conditions. When we started going to public schools, we found that what took us a few weeks in Paideia was taking us 2 or 3 months to get, to help the kids feel settled, because we weren't really using a lot of techniques that were body-based at that time. But when we really started realizing that we needed a trauma-informed approach was we started bringing CBCT to a women's prison starting in 2012. And I ended up teaching in that prison. I'm still connected to it, but for the next 5-6 years. And the very first meditation class that I went into, we were teaching CBCT. And one of the first guided meditations we did, the women sat down, we told them to lower or close their eyes, focus on the breath, sit still. And one of the women, midway through the meditation, just stood up and ran out of the room. And I thought, what's going on? And so at the end of when we finished the class, I said, she came back in and I said, what happened? Did you hate the meditation? Do you hate this class? And she said, no, I love this. I desperately want the peace and the calmness and the serenity that I sense could come from this. But when I sit down and close my eyes, I can't do it. I can't sit there. I've got to get up and get out. My body was just forcing me to do this. So how do I meditate? And I thought, I've never seen that before. I'd already been teaching meditation for, I think, over 10 years, or close to 10 years by then. So we sometimes, people who work in prisons, you don't look up people's records. Some people don't think you should know why people are incarcerated, particularly if it leads you to view them differently and maybe not see their humanity the way you would otherwise. But I thought this was an interesting case. I thought maybe I can gain some insight if I know who these women are and their background. So I looked up her case, and I found she had gotten into a fight with her girlfriend who she was living with, and her girlfriend kicked her out of the room. The girlfriend owned the house, so she was the landlord. And this woman was so angry that in the middle of the night, she took the gun that was in the house and she shot her girlfriend in the head while she was sleeping. And when I read that story, I instantly thought, wow, somebody who has had that experience is not going to be able to just sit down, close their eyes, and attain calmness through focusing on the breath. And I reached out to a meditation teacher, a master, really, Roshi Joan Halifax, who's very famous in the American Buddhist community, a Zen teacher. And I knew she had worked in prisons, maximum security prisons. I think she's worked with people on death row, I believe, but she's worked with, I mean, serious cases in prison and had many years of experience. And I just wrote her an email. I said, Roshi, I'm in this situation. I don't know exactly what to do. Could you help me? And she called me instantly on the phone. I was actually, the instant she got the email, I was out at dinner with my wife. And she calls me and she says, Brendan, we need to talk. And I said, well, I'm like in the middle of a meal. Can I call you back in an hour? She's like, okay, call me right back. So I get home, I call her, and she says, what are you doing? And I explain everything. I explain CBCT, I explain the prison, all that kind of stuff. And she stops me halfway. She says, okay, stop right there. Everything you're doing is wrong. I said, okay.
Okay, everything
Teach
you're doing
me.
is wrong.
Teach me,
Okay.
yeah. And she started talking about trauma and safety. And that led me on a journey for several years. And I soon after that, I went to Tim, who had just started working, I think, at that time at Emory, running the CBCT program. I talked to Geshe Lobsang, our director, who created the CBCT program, and said, hey, we need to, explore this thing. Because this is a big thing that we're running up against. I found that probably 2/3 of the women in those classes could not engage with meditation. They didn't all have the experience that this woman did. Some of them,
in terms of it being as extreme, but
yeah,
I'm wondering too about just a little connection though. So when you said that at the one school that with children were it was easier to teach the children how to meditate and the concepts that you were trying to get across, but in another school, and I can imagine that the children were from all different kinds of backgrounds. And so do you think that maybe the children's trauma had something to do with their inability to settle, just like with the woman in the prison? Do you think there was a connection between the two?
Yeah, I think there was a much greater diversity in the public schools of family situations, socioeconomic background, other factors, yeah, that made it hard for them to just, and the whole school environment is different too. That's something that varies quite a lot from school to school. Yeah.
But I always think about, the teachers of our lives sometimes come in unexpected places. And if this woman had not had that reaction and felt brave and courage, it really was courageous for her to step out because she couldn't stay in. And then for you to have the diligence and the curiosity to ask her, what had happened, because that started a trajectory for you about your trauma-informed and resiliency-informed work that, really gives me some ideas of how this interest, what sparked the interest. So I don't want to interrupt you, but continue in terms of what you want to say next about this experience, because I know you met Tim through this experience at the prison as well that led you to the work that you're both doing now.
Yeah, Tim came and co-taught also in the prison. When he came, there was some transition happening there too. So it was we had a lot of frustrating experiences where we'd drive 2 hours out there, hour and a half out there, and then wait, and then there would be no students. It's a particular environment, but but one of the things that we learned was I'd say about 2/3 of the women who were participating in these courses were there for murder or felony murder. So which I didn't know at the beginning because I wasn't looking at anything or didn't know who they were. Although that was one of the things that Roshi, told me was you've got to figure out who they are, like to establish safety. You can't just do what she called the Dharma download. We were talking about the mind meld earlier before we started this call. Like sometimes we just want to download into other people's minds what we know. She's like, no, you can't do that. You've got to get to know them. You've got to build relationship. So that started, me certainly on a multi-year journey to kind of try to understand trauma resilience, and ultimately through our mutual friend Lindy Graby, professor of nursing at Emory. She said, hey, she was meeting with me and she said, hey, there's this fantastic program and this fantastic person, Elaine Miller-Karras, and there's going to be a workshop. You've got to go. And that was the Trauma Resiliency Model workshop where we met. And now, all of our C-learning team has been trained in the Community Resiliency Model. It's an essential part of our program. It's chapter 2 in our curriculum, which you co-wrote, Elaine. Yes. And it's also informed the CBCT program. So it's really changed the way we view contemplative practice in the center and the way we teach it and create our programs permanently, this association.
Could you tell us a little bit more about how that trauma-informed, resiliency-informed focus changed what you're doing? It sounds like that was an important new aspect to add to the work that you were doing in the prisons.
I'd be happy to, because I think this is very important for the whole field of contemplative science, and it's still not well known enough. I mean, we only made this, we've only been doing this the past maybe 5 or 6 years now. But one of the things we do is we don't start directly with meditation or mindfulness of the breath. There's always something that comes before that. And that's one of the ways I think we've been benefited, is to recognize that helping somebody find safety in the body using body-based or sensory-based practices can be an incredible stepping stone or preliminary practice to meditation and to the exploration of emotions. It's not just that. I would never reduce the trauma and resiliency skills or CRIM to some kind of pre-meditation practice. I think that would really do it a disservice. But it's fantastic as a way of safely preparing people to engage in contemplative practice. And what I've been amazed by is even people who've meditated for a long time before learning these body-based skills, they absolutely benefit for it. So it's not just for people who have suffered from trauma or have this dysregulation in the body. That's where I think also the model you have is so great, the resiliency perspective.
And so how do you think it's helped people that you said haven't had necessarily the kind of trauma that you worked with in the prison? How do you think it's helped people that have already had a contemplative practice? Could you illuminate the specifics of what that has looked like as you shared it with others?
Yeah, well, I think we all, because, as you say, it's embarrassing saying this back to you, but as we all suffer from adversity and we all have bodies. We all get bumped out of our resilience zone. So that's a universal experience. In all our trainings, we always say, here's the model of the 3 zones: high zone, low zone, resiliency zone. What do you think it feels like to be bumped out into the high zone? And people always know. What does it feel like to be bumped into low zone? People always know. And then we say, why do you think we all know this? We didn't tell it to you. We just showed you this picture. Because we all have bodies, because we're all human beings. So, the body, the idea of regulating emotions through the body, that's amazing. CBCT is cognitively based. We can regulate emotions by shifting our perspectives. We have this great thing, the Dalai Lama, who is kind of our patron, our sponsor at the center, and the visionary behind the center. He likes to say, we have these great brains, these big brains that evolution has given us. We should use them. So we can use our brains to regulate our emotions. That's fantastic. The idea that we can use our bodies to regulate our emotions, wow, that's amazing. That's, I think, revolutionary.
And I think that, there's more and more research that's being done about this. It's called interoception, interoceptive awareness. And that there's a researcher at the University of California in San Diego, Dr. Martin Paulus, who's done work on this specific thing, that when we're able to read this nervous system of ours and then we take action, it actually it reduces people that have problems with impulse control. And also it helps us to have better regulations of our emotions. So it's really important that we all know that there is research behind paying attention to the sensations that happen inside of our body as we go through our lived experience. And I think especially right now, you're talking about the prison, but I've been working a lot in the areas of like equity and diversity and inclusion, and the degree of trauma that exists within our country regarding just what's happened over the last few years is palpable in many of us. And I think especially people of color have especially had a difficult time with some of the vitriol that has been spewed into our environment. And so having, sometimes we just can't say, stop being afraid. Stop thinking that I don't know if this person is for or against me. How can I navigate feeling safer in the world? And I think this sensory system that we're talking about is one of the vehicles, because sometimes we can't talk our way through it, but we can sense our way out of it, and also sense times where we're feeling safer, so that we can say, well, I feel safer inside my house with my family. And at this moment, I can do this. If you have a family where you feel safe in that, maybe it's outside your family. I mean, it's going to be unique and individual for all of us. But I think that bringing in the vocabulary of sensation, I've certainly seen so important in the work that I've done, and I've seen that you've integrated into the work that you're doing. So could you tell us a little bit more? I really want to know more, have our listeners know about the focus on the promotion of compassion above all else in both programs. And I know a lot of that emanates from His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and how you two walk in carrying out some of these wonderful ideas in practice. So could whichever one of you wants to go first, go ahead, Tim.
If I may start that by tying it to something we were just talking about, Elaine, because the basic idea, and I think science is bearing this out, is that compassion is something that can be learned. It's a skill. It's something we can grow, we can develop, and we can help children grow and develop it. But one of the great insights that I carry from your resiliency training, Elaine, was about how this zone of well-being, when we're in that zone, it's not just our zone of resiliency. It's not just that it feels good to be there, but also that's where we learn best. That's where we can make sense of new experience, of difficult experience. And that's what learning is. Learning always includes, by definition in some ways, some making sense of something that didn't make sense before. There's always some element of tension or stress that comes with shifting in a way that deepens our knowledge, deepens our awareness, deepens our understanding. So I think being in that zone is really helpful for the teachers in the C Learning program, and it's proving really helpful for the CBCT program as well, to understand that adults as well are going to learn best in that zone of well-being.
Oh, Tim, I just love what you said, is making sense out of things that maybe we didn't understand. Mm-hmm. And somehow these concepts, in a very simple way, help us have more self-compassion, mm-hmm. and then thus more compassion for others around us. But if we don't have that piece, sometimes we can't get to that part of how we cultivate and learn that compassion. Oh, I love that. It's almost time for us to take our break. And mm-hmm. I just want all of our listeners to know that when we return, that Tim and Brendan are going to share more of this great wisdom about compassion and the work they're doing through these two programs. So stay tuned as they come back and illuminate us more about the work that they're doing at Emory University.
All right, awesome job. Good segment. Back in a couple minutes.
Thank you so much, Matt.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Elaine. Wow, you're a pro.
This is so professional. My goodness, you have a break?
Yes, we have. Oh, I did tell you that. Yes, we have a break. It's a 2-minute break. So, I mean, I'm hoping Monday. Oh, and I just found out too, just so you know that our listeners, that I just found out that they're going to renew the show. So, I had 13 episodes.
Congratulations.
And renew it. Yes, I found out. So, I'll find out more on Wednesday. So I'm very excited about that, I can have you back again, because I know that we just are beginning to talk about. So
hopefully after they see this, they don't change their mind.
Tim, what you just said was so beautiful. Oh my gosh. I just love what you just said. Just look at me, at my hand to my heart. I I mean, that we can learn compassion. I mean, don't we need this right now? I mean, our listeners on Facebook, I've had such, oh gosh, sorrow when I've seen
Mm,
some of the hate that exists, knowing that it doesn't have to be that way. And I know that if we're going to change this world of ours in terms of coming together, that what you just said about we can learn compassion, and that
mm,
people that have some hateful thoughts, maybe they can be shifted. I mean, I feel
mhm.
that it's very possible. And I think about you working at the prisons, and people who've done horrible things to others. I mean, did you see people start to shift and change, Brendan?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So,
Every one of them. Yeah.
yeah. And so that would be, I think, something too, that when we get back online with our radio broadcast, to talk more about how we can learn compassion. Such an important mission that I think we all share. Um, and I know that I sometimes hate to admit it, but there's times that I haven't had compassionate thoughts about some people that I see in the news, and then what I try to do sometimes is imagine them as children, and if I would have known them as children, how I might have approached them, that might have given them a different idea about how to
Mm,
spread love and compassion and happiness instead of hateful thoughts and hateful actions. And
mm,
when I see it, when you work in a prison like you did, I did have one project. I would love to go back in our local women's prison too, and had the same experience. I didn't want to really know what people had done, but I can remember clearly a woman saying to me, if I would have known what you are here teaching us, I don't think I would have, if I would have known this before what I
Oh,
had
yeah.
done,
Oh, yeah.
I wouldn't be here in prison. I don't know if you've heard that. You heard that
I,
as well,
I,
Brent.
I've heard that in one form or another from every single student we taught CBCT to.
Yes.
Yeah.
wow.
Because, because especially, among the women, very few of their crimes or the murders in particular, very few of them were premeditated.
Right.
So that idea of catching the spark before the forest fire.
All right, sorry to
Yes. And I,
interrupt
and
here.
I think that's, oh, thank you. Are we ready to go back,
Yeah,
Matt?
we're just about to come back here.
Okay. Boy, I can go on and on with you two, you see. That 2 minutes went by very fast.
I can talk through the compassion.
This is Resiliency Within with Elaine Miller Karras. To reach the show during our live broadcast, please call in to 1-866-472-5792. That's 1-866-472-5792. You may also send an email to elaine@resiliencywithin.com. Now, back to this week's show.
I'm here with Brendan Ozawa-Silva and Tim Harrison. They have more thoughts about cultivating compassion and how we can learn compassion. I'm so glad we have another half an hour to continue our conversation. So, Tim, you had some more you wanted to say about this.
Well, I thought I could just share briefly this idea that you could learn compassion. What do we mean by that? So for many people, that's a new idea. I know I was raised believing or kind of told some people are compassionate, some people not so compassionate. In my case, Tim, your sister's so compassionate and you're not so compassionate. So, um, you know, the reality is we all have the capacity for it. And we favor this analogy of the flower garden. If you love beautiful flowers and you want to grow a beautiful flower garden throughout your yard, then how do you do that? And you don't just sit back and close your eyes and wish for flowers. You study what are the conditions that will help flowers to thrive in my yard. What kinds of flowers grow here, there? How much moisture is needed, how much sun, like this. And in the same way, the programs at our center at Emory, the Compassion Center, are based on an understanding of compassion as something that arises when the conditions are there to support compassion arising. We all have the seeds for it. We all have the seed inside of us, but it's not always going to show up unless the conditions are there. So two of the main conditions for compassion for others are identifying with them or empathizing with them, kind of seeing their perspective, seeing that they are another valuable human being just like you. As Brendan said, we all have bodies and minds. That's one way of understanding that others are like me, and no matter who they voted for, right? So, or what nation they live in, or what color their skin is. And the other condition that's so important is sense of tenderness toward them, or closeness toward them, seeing the value of them and what they contribute to the world, like that. So those are ways of thinking about others. But before we even look at those conditions, we, in our program, focus on what really could be loosely sort of understood as ways to be resilient within ourselves. Because the fact is, if you're cultivating compassion, you're going to start feeling these feelings of wishing other people could be well, and that those feelings are going to expand to include more and more others. That's when we say compassion training, we're not just talking about becoming more compassionate toward those we already love and care for, but actually extending that to include more and more others. So to do that, we need to, or it's going to help us if we can also be more resilient. So this is where resilience skills come in. This is where self-compassion comes in. Learning to relate to our limitations with kindness, learning to relate to our flaws, our mistakes without that harsh inner critic. So we have a whole part of our program we call self-compassion, where we really examine that inner negative self-talk that so many of us, not all of us maybe, but so many of us experience. You're not good enough, or you'll never succeed. And just to see that for what it is and learn to shift our attitude toward ourselves to have more kindness. So self-compassion is an important ingredient of compassion, actually. And then there's also a kind of what a lot of people would call a mindfulness portion of our component. It's to be aware of our inner feelings, our inner thoughts, things that are going on inside, is actually also important to be able to cultivate compassion, because that awareness allows us then to work with this inner landscape, if you will, our garden of compassion flowers. But before we do any of that, in CBCT, we have something we call the foundational module, which correlates very directly with the CRIM model that we've learned so much about, which is about identifying ways to calm ourselves, to feel more safe, more secure, to stay in that zone of resilience when we can, to notice when we're being pushed out of it, to notice when our body is telling us, oh, you're getting activated here, either high or low, and then have skills to come back and stay centered. So that's that foundation, as I mentioned before the break, is the foundation of any learning. So that's the starting point. But it all is heading toward compassion. Have I left things out, Brenda? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to say, and your program is focused towards adults, and then I'm hearing. I mean, one of the things that I loved about getting ready for the show is finding out, of course, that CBCT came first, and that the C Learning program grew out of it. And isn't this our launch, that we're letting people know that happened? You said this is the first time that maybe it's been spoken out loud. Brendan is looking at me with a big smile. So can you let us know, Brendan, a little bit about how did that happen? We just heard about the CBCT program and what it's doing, and then what about C Learning and how is it connected?
Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Yeah, CBCT was created by Geshe Lobsang Tenzin, the director of our center, from around 2004 to 2005. He created this program because there were other, as Tim mentioned, there were other mindfulness meditation programs, mindfulness-based stress reduction programs like that. But there wasn't really a program around compassion for self and others. And also the name cognitively based compassion. These techniques were drawn from cognitive approaches taken from the Lojong tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, Indian and Tibetan Buddhism. And so this idea of shifting perspectives, to cultivate compassion and focusing on interdependence and these kinds of things. There wasn't really a program like that. Mindfulness programs are much more common at that time. So that was created, and the first it was also created to promote the science of compassion. So to scientifically evaluate compassion, whether it can be cultivated as a skill, as Tim said, which was still much more of an open question back then, 15 years ago. And there wasn't the term science of compassion. I don't think anybody used that term back then. There was really no science of compassion. So studies started being done. The first study was on undergraduates, and then there was a 5-year study. Our group got a NIH grant to run a 5-year study with adults. But pretty early on, people in the Atlanta area started saying, hey, what about kids? Could kids benefit from this too? So someone from the Georgia's Department of Family and Child Services reached out and said, could we do this with foster children in the state system? So for about 2 years, we started teaching CBCT to foster kids. And at the same time, the Paideia School reached out, Barbara Dunbar at the Paideia School reached out and said, could we bring this to our school, and could we do this for kids? So early on, especially working with the early elementary school kids, it became clear that we weren't going to be able to use the standard way of delivering CBCT, which, back then was to sit in front of a group of people and kind of deliver a 1-hour lecture and then lead them in a guided meditation.
No, that wasn't going to work with little kids, no.
No. So we started working, as Tim said, just adapting everything into activities, games, exercises for the kids, really breaking it down. We worked with Kelly Richards, who later became a curriculum writer for the Sea Learning program, who was a teacher at Paideia. And we started kind of crafting things. And then Tim alluded to the 2010 visit of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Emory. His Holiness has visited the Dalai Lama has visited Emory several times. And founded the Emory Tibet Partnership, which then became our center in 1998. And in 2010, he visited, and a few of us, Geshe Lobsang and I and a few others, we were able to present on what we were doing. And I was given the opportunity to be the one to present on what we were doing with kids, which was great, and in schools. And the Dalai Lama, I'll never forget, after I gave the presentation, he said, it seems like it's dawn now and the sun is coming out. Like, that was his reaction to the presentation. And I was just I was blown away, Now,
can I just ask you one little simple question? As you share this experience of what His Holiness the Dalai Lama said to you about dawn, what do you notice happening on the inside? I'm just curious, since we're talking about sensations. What are you aware of, Brendan?
Well, I think it brings me back to that moment, I think, of that surreal moment. I'm not even sure I can put it into words.
And is it
I feel pleasant in my body.
Yeah. Go ahead.
It's funny. That's such an incredible experience. I don't even know whether I can categorize it as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral, which is something I've been doing with you for at least 6 years now.
For a long time.
It's transcendent.
Transcendent. And so when you say that it's transcendent, is it embodied?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. It's just tingling in my body.
Yes. There you go.
All throughout my body.
Really, because the constructs of pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral are just constructs of cognition, but that doesn't necessarily mean they fit into every human experience. But when you say it's transcendent and it's tingling and the other sensations, that's when it becomes embodied. So I just had to not lose that moment, because those of you that are on the live stream Facebook could see his face and his hands move in particular direction. Yes, as it's going outward, Tim, exactly that. And that's what's so important about not as capturing that moment. That moment was captured, and we just recaptured again when you said, "Oh, it's like it was happening again." So anyway, thank you for going down this little journey of pausing for a moment about this transcendent experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Elaine. I mean, thank you for giving me the opportunity to share that, and also for stopping me, because I think, you, as you always do, you modeled what CRIM is all about, which is about taking the time to stop and actually notice.
Yes, exactly. So, and so as he said that to you, then what happened? How did C Learning? That was 2010. This is only 2021. And I know 2019, the three of us were in New Delhi in India at the launch of C Learning, which was quite an amazing event. And I know that all of you at Emory at the center were working very hard to make that happen. So how did that come about from that moment of the dawn to the 2019 that now C Learning is in how many countries around the world so far? Do you have
So
that, the
it's
last number you told me?
over 30 countries.
Over 30 countries.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah. Although we have teachers now in over 145 countries who have taken the online training.
so
So teachers in over, yeah, but formal implementation, I
over
think,
145 countries. Oh my.
yeah,
So can you tell us more about this? And we really want to also have people understand how they can avail themselves to both of your programs.
sure.
But so from that wonderful moment where you were with His Holiness and he was experiencing the dawn and you were there receiving that, and then now. So tell us more. We want to know how this journey continued.
Sure. Well, I think really, the credit has to go to our director, Geshe Lobsang Tenzin, because we made little efforts, and he was behind all of this, everything I've been describing before. But it was in 2015 that he called a group of us together. We were at diverse institutions at that time. I was teaching at Life University. Jen Knox, who was part of that early group, is a teacher at Woodward and now an administrator, Woodward Academy, an independent school here in Atlanta. He pulled together a group of us and said, the Dalai Lama, wants a program created to bring secular ethics and compassion, basic human values into education in K through 12 schools and higher education throughout the world. And we're going to make this happen. And we, and Tim was there, and Carol Beck, our other associate director, and a few others, and we just sat down for hours and hours and hours. We had 5-hour-long meetings, 7-hour-long meetings. Marcia, one of our colleagues, I remember one time she just pulled her sweater over her head and went into hiding because the meeting was going on for so long. She said, "Marcia, are you okay?" She's like, "We've been here for 7 hours."
Well, what strikes me is that you were giving birth. When giving birth doesn't happen just in in an hour or so.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
So that led to a volume which was called Secular Ethics in Education. It's 300 pages. We pulled that together in a couple months. It has sample lessons. It had a sample framework. And we sent that to His Holiness the Dalai Lama, and he apparently, he liked it. He actually started printing off copies and sending them all around the world and giving them, when he met President Obama in 2016. He mentioned this program, the C Learning program, and President Obama said, "Send a copy to my Secretary of Education." So His Holiness the Dalai Lama became kind of a champion for this, and then also arranged for us to get funding through his foundation to give birth to this program. So the program kind of started in its earliest forms in 2015, but then it went through several different stages of getting the curriculum right, getting the framework right. We had many expert advisors. Once people knew, oh, this was the Dalai Lama's program, and he was collaborating with Emory, then that opened up everybody to wanting to collaborate with us. Including, I still remember, approaching you, Elaine, and saying, "Can we use CRIM for this program?" And the instant you heard it was the Dalai Lama's program, it opens doors.
I didn't have a hesitation, but I think if you would have asked me, Brendan, I don't think I would have had a hesitation.
Okay.
So I just want you to know that.
That's
As many people around the world know, and I've said, "Oh, you want to use the Community Resiliency Model for a project? Tell me about it." Okay, let's go.
Yeah. You've been extremely generous, of course, in just getting this out there, getting these skills out there, which is what we want to do too. And that's why our program is free also. All the materials are free. And as you said, with a lot of work and then growing the team and the help of our incredible team members who have put in so much effort and dedication, they're all fantastic. We were able to get to this launch in April of 2019. which took place in Delhi, India. You were there on stage with us, of course, and Tim, and we launched C-Learning. There were 1,000 people there from, I think, 37 different countries interested in education and bringing this program to education. And you talk about wonderful moments, since you made me share the other one, invited me to share the other one. Another thing I'll never forget is when we presented the volumes to His Holiness. My colleagues brought the books, on stage, and gave it to him and the two others, another Nobel laureate and a minister of education there in the Indian government. And they when they kind of unveiled the books and lifted them up, there were the 1,000 people that were there from 37 countries all got up and cheered. And that was amazing. Like, I've never been in an event like that. I mean, you could sense that people were just so happy that this thing existed. And we've seen that in the incredible uptake of the program all around the world. It's being translated into 18 languages now. As I mentioned, all the materials are free. We have affiliates. We have 36 primary and secondary affiliates in different countries now, who are all working to bring this to children. So I think the Dalai Lama's vision that this was something the world needed is really being borne out. We're really seeing that.
Oh, I have so much gratitude that you reminded both Tim and I of that moment, because I certainly have tears in my eyes again, twice in one show, being in that audience and feeling that energy of this coming forward in the world was quite an amazing moment. But, one of the things I want to bring out, I had the great fortune of being one of the moderators along with Lindy of the children's discussion at the launch. And I want to just point out one little boy. You will remember the little boy that he, and this is what I think is so important about the trauma-informed and the resiliency-informed and what the model is doing in many ways. But of course, this was a crim moment. But we asked the children, what did they like best about the program? And all the children had different answers of things they wanted to say. And this one little boy, he shared with us that one of his parents was a drug addict, and the other one the other parent had died, and that his two younger brothers lived in the slums in Dharamsala, and that sometimes he really missed them. And one of the skills of chapter 2, the Community Resiliency Model, helped him. And I said, well, which one was that? He said, my teachers let me, when I get bumped out of my zone, I can push against the wall. And he goes, when I push against the wall, he said, the sadness, and he started stroking his arms downward. He said, the sadness starts to leave my arms. So he had the sensory experience of the emotion of sadness slowly leaving in his arms. And I'll never forget what he said. I thought it was so organic. He said, and it leaves enough that I can go back and study and learn. And that comes back to what you said, Tim, about if we're not in that zone of well-being, it is hard for us to learn and to pay attention, not only to our studies, but to how we cultivate compassion. But I thought that was one little boy who's had such a traumatic life. The slums of Dharamsala are not an easy place to be. And he could have that experience through the program. That was a moment that to me was, for me, like winning the Academy Award, to hear that little boy and how his life and what his life may be like, because he has the advantage of being not only in the school, but of learning everything that you have in the C-Learning. But it just was such an incredible moment to me. There's one other thing I would like you to maybe just say in a couple of minutes, Brendan, is that there's chapter 2, but you have distinct chapters that help the children learn about their community, about how they learn about how to be compassionate. Could you just speak a little bit to that and about what the C-Learning does in order to amplify that, so people who might think they might want to go and look at C-Learning know that it's about many things, not only about that piece of what we cultivate inside of ourselves, but how we see our world in the macro system.
Sure, thank you. And I'd just say that, we keep mentioning our materials and our programs. We have a website, compassion.emory.edu, And people can find out about the CBCT program, the C-Learning program. We also have clearning.emory.edu, which is where we have our curriculum and other resources.
clearning.edu. Remember that, because that's where you can get a hold of all these materials that are free that you can bring to your local school and learn how to be a facilitator of the C-Learning program. Is that correct?
That's right. clearning.emory.edu.
Sorry.
SEE learning.emory.edu. Yeah.
Okay.
And so, the C-Learning program, Chapter 2, comes from the Community Resiliency Model. It's these body-based resiliency skills, which Elaine co-wrote with us. But Chapter 1 introduces the idea of compassion and really the foundation of our program, which is common humanity and interdependence. So what does it mean to be together in community? How are we interdependent? And how do we recognize our commonalities and our differences, the ways in which we're unique?
Well, so one of the things I'm noticing is our time is quickly slipping away. That happened quite quickly. Yes. So we're going to have you come back and talk more about the program, because I think we all need to learn more. And if you can, Tim, just tell us, how do people find out about CBCT? We know how to find out about the C-Learning program.
All the programs are at compassion.emory.edu. And then I've got to plug briefly our Compassion 21-day Compassion Challenge starts this Saturday with March 6th with a full day of compassion events. It's all free. We have all these great, carefully designed little videos to introduce people to these ideas if you want to learn more. And there you could look up compassionshift.emory.edu. But if you go to compassion.emory.edu, it's all there. It's all there.
Great. And so we can all take part of this compassion challenge. So I'm hoping all my listeners will think about this. And as I want to thank my guests very much. Oh my goodness, it just is so clear to me that I can talk to you for another hour or two or more. So I'm going to bring you back. And I want to also say, as we're getting ready to leave today, as you go through your week until we meet again next week, is that think about what else is true. Think about what these two gentlemen have said about compassion. And if you're maybe feeling a little bit forlorn about, I don't know if I'm a compassionate person and could I learn? Remember what Tim said, that we can learn how to be compassionate. Remember what else is true. Thank you so much for joining us this beautiful day. Thank you, my guests.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thank you
so much.
All right, awesome job today. Great show. We're all clear.
Thank you, Matt.
You're welcome.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Yep, have a good one. Thank you.
Thanks. You. All right, you two. We're still on our live stream. Oh my goodness. I couldn't believe that we had 5 minutes left. I don't know. We had 10 and all of a sudden I'm going, when I asked you that question, I go, what happened to the 5 minutes? So I'm going, oh no, I'm going to have to interrupt you because you got to say a little bit about the chapters, Brendan.
I'm glad you interrupted me. Otherwise, I would have gone on for half an hour explaining all chapters one by one. We can
continue. What I really do want to call you back, but I just also want, because we have the listeners that are on the live stream. But in terms of there's actually exercises to work with the community in the C-Learning program. Is that correct? You have exercises that help the children learn about their communities and things that they do within the program.
There's a kind of capstone project at the end of the curriculum where they are encouraged to use the skills and knowledge they've gained from all the different chapters, including the resiliency skills, but also, last chapter is on systems thinking. So they're learning how to think about systems, in increasingly sophisticated ways, pretty sophisticated ways, actually, about using the systems iceberg, feedback loops, all these kinds of things. So they, at the end, they're encouraged to bring all those skills to a particular issue of concern for them in their school, their community, or in society. And so that's where they really engage. And some of the schools have done incredible work in that regard. You mentioned the school which was set up for children from the slum communities in Dharamsala, the boy that came from that school, the Tonglen school. They actually have 4 different sets of projects that they do that are related to the community, and they sent us their annual report. I can't remember the exact numbers, but each project reaches thousands of people in the community. So you put them all together and they're reaching maybe 10, 20,000 people in the community doing community artwork and workshops and engagement. And it's just really amazing. And it's funny because this has attracted the headmasters or principals of other schools in the area. And they went to Venerable Jamyang, the headmaster of Tonglen, and they said, oh, he said, they don't care about this compassion and secular ethics stuff, but they're so amazed by what we're doing in the community. They want to learn, how are you doing that? And I try to explain to them, it's actually connected.
It's connected. That's a really wonderful thing but isn't that great? I mean, what you said earlier, Tim, about, I love, because I often talk about the garden, about what you pay attention to grows, and you brought in the garden and the flowers and how that's spreading. I mean, look at how it's spreading. I mean, that's not very long. I mean, when you think about that, you first started doing the curriculum in 2015, even though there was some earlier derivations of what you were doing, that's really a short period of time to get that kind of change. You wonder what it's going to happen in another year as it grows. Think about 145, different people from around the world have looked at the curriculum, and you've got 35 countries. I mean, how amazing is that? I know I recently talked to a group of the Ukrainians who, I guess it's being launched by their Ministry of Education. So that will be throughout Ukraine. Wow. And I imagine you have other countries as well.
That's right. Yeah. The organization there at Camp Ukraine, they have done a fantastic job. They, by themselves, they've reached about 35,000 educators in Ukraine, just their one organization alone. And they have close ties to the successive ministers of education in the government there. And so C-learning is an official experiment of an official pedagogical experiment of the university of the Ministry of Education in Ukraine, thanks to the wonderful people at EdCamp Ukraine. So that's how we're able to reach so many people, is the incredible work of these affiliates who are able to bring it out in such remarkable ways.
And these collaborations. I mean, that's just, and I think that, again, all the different, how we come around and who's touched our lives, and oh my goodness. So I wanted to share something with you, is that back in, let's see, in 2006, that the Trauma Resource Institute is a nonprofit, and our nonprofit status is through the state of New Mexico. So two of the people that I started Try with, Jeannie Everett and Lori Leach, both were living in New Mexico at the time. So Lori Leach was an associate of Roshi. And so just so you know how circles happen. So we did trainings for the Upaya Zen Center.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Back in 2008, 9, I mean, many, many years. Now there was Lori left Try in 2012, and she continued to do things through Upaya Zen Center, and I continued to do things in other areas. But to know that between, I think it was probably 2008 when we did our first trauma-informed, resiliency-informed training there. So even back then, there has been a circle between what we do at Try and that conversation. I can't imagine that she hadn't been somehow influenced by the work that the Trauma Resource Institute, and she was especially close to Lori Leach.
Wow. I didn't know that. It's such a small world, and it's all these little feedback loops.
Very, very small world. Yes.
Wow.
Yes. So there you go.
That's amazing.
I know. Isn't that amazing?
Cool. Yeah.
So at that time, when we first started the Trauma Resiliency Model, we didn't have CRIM in the beginning. We only had the Trauma Resiliency Model. Actually, was called Trauma First Aid. That was the first derivation. That probably was the first training we did there, was probably called Trauma First Aid. So I'd have to go look back to when that was, but I'm going to have to go dig up the date to tell you about when that was. So anyway, how we do these circles in life. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know there's more to say, and I know that you have a very important project, Brendan, to get back to. Not to say that you probably have an important project too, Tim. And I would want you to make sure you get that project off.
Lots going on. Try to get the Compassion Challenge launched.
And I haven't registered yet. I hope we put it on our social media. I hope that everyone
Thank you.
registers for the Compassion Challenge.
Yeah.
I haven't registered yet, but I'm going to register when I get off today because I want to take that I definitely need to take that Compassion Challenge about certain world events. So I am going to do that to cultivate my compassion. And I just want to see if there's anything more that you two want to say, any parting words to our listeners on Facebook.
I wish we could meet and talk in real life, but
Oh my, I know. I'm coming
but
back
thank
to
you
Atlanta.
for,
You know that I'm coming back when
I
I mean,
know you
pretty
will.
soon.
Yeah.
I'm coming back. I'm
Yeah.
definitely coming back.
Yeah.
We definitely
Yeah.
have more conversations that need to be had, I
I
think.
want to visit you, and
Well, you definitely can come to California. My goodness.
yeah, I
It's
love
like I
California.
live in a really nice place. And yeah, and I'm getting a new kitchen in a week or so. So it's not going to be very good in the next month, but I'm getting a new kitchen. So that's the thing about the pandemic. You start living in your space and you notice all the flaws and the blemishes and the things that you should have done, like 5 years
Yes.
ago, 10 years
Yes.
ago. You start working on your house. Well, anyway, Brendan, I want to give you a chance. Is there anything that you want to say?
I just want to say
Parting words?
that I just also want to say that, Tim was walking me through briefly the website that was created for the Compassion Challenge, 21-day Compassion Challenge, and it's I'm looking forward to signing up for it too and going through it, because it's an incredible set of resources, videos, guided meditations, instructions, activities, to lead people through this 21 days. And it's great that in these times when we have to be isolated and staying at home, we can still engage communally together in an activity like this, go through this experience together that is brought about by the work of so many brilliant and skillful people, and people like Tim, who've been doing this for quite a long time now and experience in so many different fields. So I think it's going to be a great thing. I want to join you both in encouraging people to sign up for it and participating in this.
Yes. And I also, sometime I want a longer conversation, Tim. I just love, you were an architect. Did I hear that correctly?
That is
And,
true.
and did you ever imagine that your life would take this course?
No, I had no idea.
Isn't that something? I just love what we sometimes think we're going to do in life, and then what we end up doing may not be at all. I don't know. Did you imagine maybe you did, Brendan? Did you imagine yourself like working in this way with curriculum with children? And
I'm still wondering what I'm going to do when I grow up.
I was going to say, I don't know if I'm done.
wow. But it's so interesting. All you have to do is pay attention, right? So a very wise person told me, if you pay attention, the course will be known to you. And I think that was one of the best truisms that I have heard in my life. And that means paying attention, but also it's the embodied paying attention. Because I think I've paid attention at times that weren't embodied. And that's been the slippery slope of my life, when things sometimes haven't gone the way that maybe I felt were the best learning for me, if that makes sense, that we've had, challenges. We've all have challenges in our life. And so, but when it's embodied and we pay attention, then it seems clear. I'm a lot older than the two of you, so more lived experience under my belt. So who knows what else you're going to do? I hope I'm able to live to see it. So we'll see. So thank you, you two.
Thank you.
You're both in my heart very much, and can't wait to see you so I can give you proper hugs in person.
Thanks, Elaine.
That
great.
will be nice. That
All
day
right.
will come.
Okay, signing off. Bye-bye.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Take care.
Brendan.
Bye, Tim.